Hey, folks. Just a minute. How y'all doing? So, all right. I was just spending the last couple hours trying to dig through and find us some greatest hits of interviews. So Krista had a good one to suggest. And I'm wondering if any of you guys had any in addition. Has anyone seen any? Okay. So I have a few to share with you guys. Why don't it's 2 minutes into it, so why don't I just get started? There's Ethan, and Krista will probably be with us in a minute. So why don't I just get started by showing you guys an interview clip. And what I want y'all to do is write down the questions, just take a note of what the questions are that Elisa Chang asked in this interview. We'll probably have to hear like a little bit of an ad, that's usually what happens on NPR before it gets going, but then let's listen to it, write down the questions, and then we'll talk about maybe what your thoughts are about those questions, if any. So let me go ahead and play this interview. Hi, Charleston. What I'm going to do is play an interview, and I want you guys to write down the questions, and then we'll talk about it. And while you're doing that, think about, so do you guys remember I kind of had come up with 4 different names for interviews, which were, what did I come up with here? Let's see. The trap, the basics, the pivot, and the casual. As a matter of fact, let's start with, maybe just for a sake of contrast, before we listen to the Elisa Chang one, let's listen to this one, or just this sequence.
Inquisitor. Sir, what manufacturers are the 3 biggest employers in the state of Louisiana?
Well, we have a number of employers in our state.
But who are the 3 biggest manufacturers?
You guys can't see it, right? Well, let me share the screen. Go back a second.
Biggest employers in the state of Louisiana.
But we have a number of employers in our state.
But who are the 3 biggest manufacturers who are the biggest employers in the state of Louisiana?
I couldn't give you their name right off, sir.
You don't know who the biggest employers in the state of Louisiana?
I don't have the statistics in front of me. I know a lot of it.
Sir, you're talking about economic development, and you don't know.
I tell you what, the state of Louisiana is the biggest employer in our state. And because it is so big, and there's so many employees, and there's so much waste and inefficiency, and there's so many selling of positions, and there's so much corruption in government, it's hurting every business in the state of Louisiana. That's the biggest.
Mr. Duke, let me get back.
Now, I couldn't give you the exact rank from the other.
I'm not asking for rank. I asked you for any 3 names of a large employer. Let me ask you another. Mr. Edwards, just a second. We'll get to you. Mr. Duke, please. All right. In terms of economic development, the condition of your state, how many people in your state live below the poverty line?
A great percentage. So we have the highest per capita percentage in the country, just about the last 5 states of the country.
How many?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, sir.
Sir,
I don't carry around an almanac with me.
Well, if I told you it was 25% of your state live below the poverty line, would you believe me?
I could believe you, yes.
Are these the kinds of things the governor should know? Who the largest employers are? How many people live below the poverty line?
The primary rationale given for the war in Iraq was Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. In August of 2002, this is what you told the VFW. Let's just watch it. Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. In fact, there is grave doubt because they did not exist along the lines that you described, the president described, and others described. based on what you know now, that Saddam did not have the weapons of mass destruction described, would you still have gone into Iraq?
Yes, Tim, because what the reports also showed, while he did not have stockpiles, clearly the intelligence that said he did was wrong. That was the intelligence all of us saw. That was the intelligence all of us believed.
You voted to authorize war. The resolution you voted for, Robert Byrd said was a blank check for George Bush. Ted Kennedy says was a vote for war. James Carville and Paul Begala said anyone who says that vote wasn't a vote for war is bunk.
Well, Tim, if I had a lot of paper in front of me, I could quote people who say something very differently. So I know you're very good at this and I respect it.
I want to bring you back to Thursday in an exchange we had. Here's a question I asked you and your response. Let's watch. Senator McCain, you have said repeatedly, quote, I know a lot less about economics than I do about military and foreign policy issues. I still need to be educated. Is it a problem for your campaign that the economy is now the most important issue, one that, by your own acknowledgement, you are not well versed in?
Actually, I don't know where you got that quote from. I'm very well versed in economics.
Well,
Now I know where you got that quote from. Now I know where you got that
I will show you where I got the quote from. I got it from John McCain, and here it is. McCain is refreshingly blunt when he tells me, quote, I'm going to be honest. I know a lot less about economics than I do about military and foreign policy issues. I still need to be educated. When you announced your candidacy back in February of 2007 in Springfield, the same place Abraham Lincoln announced his candidacy, and we're showing it there on the screen, Reverend Wright was going to give the invocation. He was disinvited. He told the New York Times that you said to him, quote, you get kind of rough in the sermons, so we decided it's best for you not to be out there in public. And you cited a Rolling Stone interview where he said that one of the essential facts about the U.S. is, quote, we believe in white supremacy and black inferiority and believe it more than we believe in God. Now, that is so contrary to a speech I heard you gave yesterday about one nation, one people.
Right.
So you knew in 2007,
Right.
this guy's a problem.
Right.
I have to keep him out of the spotlight involving my campaign.
Right.
Why didn't you just say then, you know, Reverend, we're going on different paths because this country does not believe in white supremacy and black inferiority.
Right. Well, my commitment, as I said, Tim, is to the church, not to a pastor.
It's kind of funny that last part gets flipped around nowadays. Maybe there's more thought that the country believes in white supremacy. I don't know. Anyway, what kind of, so do you guys remember the types of interviews I identified? What kind was that? What did you say?
Trap.
Trap. Yeah. So, and you know, I guess the reason I bring it up is that it's broadcast, and it's, you know, I played it first. I was going to move to one of the other ones first, but I think maybe by way of contrast, maybe that was the best one to show first, because it's so different than what you guys, the kinds of things that you guys need to focus on and get good at. But it's the thing that we generally think of first when we think of interview style and interview technique, right? So, okay, let me play you guys another one. Write down the questions and see if you can figure out of the types that they gave you, which are what? The trap, the basics, the pivot, and the casual, which one this type is. But write down the questions also so we can talk about the questions themselves. There's probably an ad.
The Pacific Northwest was hot, dry, and windy this holiday weekend, and that explosive mix of weather helped fuel wildfires throughout the region. Evacuations are in place in many towns throughout Oregon and Washington, and the city of Malden, Washington, was almost completely burned to the ground yesterday. Whitman County Sheriff Brett Myers responded to the fire, and he joins us now. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Well, I know that you were on the ground yesterday helping with the evacuation. Can you just give us a sense of what did it look and what did it sound like?
I mean, as you come into the town, it was more homes on fire than there were standing. So it was for every 3 or 4 homes that were literally being burnt to the ground, there would be one home still standing. And there were people watering down their property, doing what they could. Those people that had some green and some buffer around their home were able to maintain their homes.
Watering down their homes, though, with what? Garden hoses?
With garden hoses, yeah. And the thing is, at that point, you just got to encourage those people to do what they think is best. That's not a time for me to negotiate over somebody. If they want to stay there and they're winning the fight, more power to them. But for those people that decided there was no way they were going to win that, they got out of town. And you know, I can tell you, anytime you're engulfed at times by smoke to where you can't see in front of you, fire encroaching right on the road, houses that when you drove by, yeah, the inside of your vehicle would heat up 30 to 50 degrees just instantly. The intensity of that fire was pretty close to a war zone.
Well, can you estimate for me what percentage of the town is still standing?
It's hard to say. When I went back up this morning, it looks like maybe about 20% of the town is still standing.
That's it.
If I don't have an exact number of the homes yet, but you know, it's easy to say that if there was 100 homes in Malden, 80 of them have burned to the ground.
And how long do you think it took for the fire to devour some 80% of the town?
From the time it got to the city limits to the time it was through the town was maybe 2.5 hours, and then the fire burned the rest of the night. But most of the homes that caught on fire caught in fire within 2 to 3 hours at the very most.
And do authorities have a clear idea of what specifically caused the fire?
That is still under investigation. So, you know, you have a lot of farmland around here, high winds, you have a highway that goes through there. Is it a spark from a car? Is it something that happened, you know, in a field? Is it a cigarette that went out the window? That one we might not ever know, but we do know the approximate location where the fire started.
Well, what does the county need most from the state and federal level at this point?
You know, at this point, the big issue is that we're not the only place that's being impacted. We're the only place that lost an entire community, but there's big fires going on everywhere in Washington and Oregon. And so just making sure we have the resources we have and that we can get these fires put down. I think one of the things too that we see around the country and around the West are so many of our small towns are staffed with, you know, volunteer fire departments who they have different careers, different jobs, and they give up their time. And I got to be honest with you, the amount of people that dropped everything they had to do, from farmers to firemen, from all other agencies that came to help was, you know, an awesome sight. And that's one of the things that living in small rural communities we see. But the graciousness of the people that did everything they could to help people, it warms your heart. And when there's a question today whether or not, you know, society is losing grip, all you have to do is be in one of these small towns and watch people go out of their way to help other people, and you get a little bit of respect back for and a little bit of hope back for our human race.
That's good to hear, despite what has happened. Yeah. Brett Myers is the sheriff of Whitman County. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I wish you and the community the best of luck.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
And just to note that as of air.
Okay. Did you guys get down any of the questions? Did any of them leap out at you one way or another? What kinds of things did she ask?
She asked what percentage of the town is still standing.
Mm-hmm.
And if he knew like the actual statistic of it. And I think, did he say like 20% was still up?
Yeah, I think so. So we have the transcript, so we can go back. What else what else did she ask?
She asked if they knew the cause.
Right. Yeah, that's she asked that one. What else?
What the county needed from the state or federal level.
Yeah. And do you guys notice any that you didn't have prepared?
She asked what they were watering their houses with.
Yeah. So what kind of interview was this of the group, what do you say? The trap, the pivot, the basics, or the casual?
What did you say that the basics was?
Just getting the fundamental, like the who, what, when, where, the basic questions of what happened answered, because I was saying, in certain times when you have a developing situation or a complicated situation, the most important thing is to get your arms around it, find out what happened. So which of these do you think it was? Was it a trap? Was she trapping him was she being confrontational the way Russert was? What about casual? Was it a featurey kind of culture thing?
I think it was casual.
What do you guys think? Was it casual? I guess when I mean casual, Aaron, I mean like you do with like a comedian or like like a friendly like interview, or like with a chef, more like a lighter, a feature type of thing. So in that sense, it wasn't really casual, right? I mean, she was not being adversarial, but it wasn't like a feature. It was a news story, right? So what about the pivot or the basic? That leaves the pivot of the basics. We know it's not a trap. We know it's not casual. Nate, do you have a sense of what kind of if which one of these it would fit in more with, the basics or the pivot?
I'd say basic.
Yeah. Did it strike any of you guys that her questions were, I mean, what did you guys think in terms of it being basic questions? Were they the kind of thing that would have been easy to come up with? Or, I mean, did you think she did a pretty good job of thinking through like what she needed to know? You guys don't have any view of it? I mean, what if you were doing the interview right now? Do you think you guys could have done as good a job, or did you see something about her questions that that kind of tell you something about how to do these?
To me, it was just very like conversational. Like she just asked him like first like what it looked like, what it like sounded like his experience of it, and then from there she kind of went on to ask based off of what he said.
Mm-hmm. Did any of you think? I mean, I think maybe her best moment. I mean, I don't know. Does anyone agree with me that she did a good job of sort of figuring out, or at least her producers, the team at NPR did a good job of figuring out what do we need to know here? Like a question like what percentage of the town burned down seems like a really simple question, but it's also something where you have to step back and you have to say, not just what do we want to know about, but what do we know that we don't know? Like we need to ask something about how much devastation was done, what was caused. I mean, it's not necessarily complicated, but you do have to take the time to kind of carefully think through what's going on in every situation, right? And you don't necessarily know. I mean, when you come up with your own idea for a story, then your own curiosity is going to drive what you come up with interview questions. But when you're just confronted with an event, you have to step back and you have to say, okay, what do we need to know about that? So was there anything in what she said that you thought was most impressive about that? Or, I mean, I'm not saying it's like one of the world's great interviews, but of the particularly good questions she asked, was there any that you thought were particularly good? I mean, what about the one about the water hose? Do you guys think you would have thought, as soon as he said there's all these homes on fire, people watering down these, their properties, that you would have asked how? Does it seem like it got an interesting answer?
I think the point of that question was to get either a good quote or some nuance to the story. Because I mean, there's wildfires all the time. There's common question. There's basic questions, but then that would maybe provide a quote or some character for their story. So they probably asked that question for that exact reason.
Yeah, I think what she was trying to do is she that's a yes no question, right? Was it garden hoses in a way, or what kind of things were they using to water it down? If she, he didn't really respond with just a list of the ways that they were watering down the fires, right? But it got him to slow down and talk about this fight against the fire, right? And actually he pivoted to the fact that there was this dilemma about whether they should stay and fight the fire or whether they should go. And he was like, at that point, you just got to encourage these people to do what they think best. This is not a time for me to negotiate over somebody. If they want to stay there and they're winning the fight, more power to them. So he actually kind of pivoted to like what he was dealing with at the time, which was, do I tell him to go or do I let him stay? But sometimes just by asking a question like that and getting the person to slow down and start getting into the details of what happened, you get the deeper story, right? So it's important to kind of be able to step in and do that. Okay, did anyone else have any thoughts before we move on? Let me see what else she said here before I do. I mean, he talked a lot about, this showing people opening up and helping each other out. Do you think we can credit her with getting that out of him, or do you think that she just let the interview breathe enough to let him share that kind of stuff? Like, was she particularly empathetic, or, was it just that the pace of it was good? Do you guys have any sense? I don't know. I mean, it seems to me like there was enough kind of breathing room in there for him to express himself, right? But she didn't necessarily draw that out. He pretty much, this stuff about the small towns that he said at the end, he pretty much volunteered that, right? And so sometimes it's just a question of just letting the person talk. Okay, let's do another one of these.
Finally.
So again, I'm going to say take a note of the questions, and then we can talk about any impressions you have of them once we have that.
The fifth in our series of immigration insights. For that, we go to Maricopa County, Arizona, which includes the city of Phoenix and has become a major transit point for thousands of illegal aliens who cross the border from Mexico every year. The sheriff of Maricopa County is Joe Arpaio. He's developed something of a reputation for his get tough approach to illegal immigration. I spoke with him recently from Tempe. Welcome, Sheriff Arpaio.
My pleasure.
In Washington, as you know, the debate over immigration comes down to the choice between border security and what some people describe as opportunity for the people who are trying to get to the United States for better lives. How do you see it?
Well, first of all, I lived in Mexico. I was head of the federal drug enforcement for 4 years. I'm one politician that knows where Mexico is, having lived there. I do have compassion for the Mexican people. On the other hand, I will enforce the law. I'm a law-elected sheriff. There's a new law that was passed in Arizona. I am the only one enforcing that new law, which is very strange, that when the coyote or the smuggler comes into this country with people that are being smuggled in, those smugglees can also be charged according to a decision by the county attorney. So we have locked up 258 already under this new law. I will continue to do it. You should enforce the law. There is a federal law that very seldom is put into effect You can get 6 months in jail just for being illegal in this country.
Who should be paying for this? If indeed that the local law enforcement has decided, you have decided to take it into your hands to enforce this law and to stop immigration in its tracks, who's paying for that? Is it a federal taxpayer paying for it, or is it the local taxpayer?
No, it's a state law that we're paying. I run the jails. I have 2,000 in the tents, in the hot tents. I'm not concerned about overcrowding. We do have 10,000 prisoners. 1,000 of them are illegals, but I'm not concerned. That's not a cop-out for me. It's a cop-out for everybody else, including the federal government, always saying we don't have any room for them. Well, they can put tents up at the border if they want. They can always make room for those that are caught. Now, I'm talking about enforcing the law right now. You have the National Guard. You have increased border patrol. I am saying from now on, anybody that crosses that border should be charged under the federal law, and this will stop them from coming over.
So describe this project you have. A lot of people are familiar with it, in which you have built tents in the desert, essentially, in order to house this influx of immigrants who have been arrested. Does the punishment fit the crime?
First of all, I put the tents up after I took office 14 years ago. I just happen to be increasing the space in the tents in case I need the tents. Since I'm the only one enforcing a law here in Arizona, not many people are locking up these illegals where I would have to incarcerate them. I'm the only one doing it. So we've incarcerated about 300. I can put 3,000 in if I have to.
Can I ask you about impact? Has crime gone down? Has employment increased? What has happened that you can point to that is the net good result of your having enforced the law, as you put it?
Well, not enough time to tell. This law we've been enforcing in the last 4 months. I'll tell you one thing, it's stopping the illegals from coming through Maricopa County. They know they're going to jail and not the free ride back in an air-conditioned bus back to Mexico. So we're having difficulty finding these people. I have a volunteer posse out there along with my deputies. We're proactive, and we're going to continue to arrest illegals and the smugglers that come into this county. See, I have illegals in jail, and they can't cut palm trees or work in jail and send money back to their loved ones. So it's an economic problem. If you start putting them in jail, then they won't come over because they can't make any money in jail to send back to their family.
One of the things that officials in Los Angeles, for instance, have said is that they feel, police officials have said that they feel that they may be losing informants, people who can help them, undocumented workers who could help them solve crimes by intimidating them into not coming forward because of enforcement of laws like this.
All right, so let's just stop it there. Did you guys get down any of her questions? Did any of them jump out at you? What were your impressions of that interview?
I think the one that jumped out for me was asking who was paying for it, since they're kind of taking it into their own hands.
Yeah. So could we categorize this again with, I mean, what struck you about that, Charleston?
Well, I just think it's just a big issue when it comes to money. It's just a huge issue because if it's our money too, if it's taxpayer money, it's just a huge thing that involves everyone, not just the law and whoever's running the law and whatnot. It's going to be involving everyone if it's all our money that's involved in it.
Yeah. So it was a good question in that sense because it got an important issue, right? What do you think it took for her to come up with a question like that as the journalist?
Probably research into what the guy was doing in itself, that since he was taking it more on his hands or in their hands, it seemed like. And like, I know she even went into later on into the questions about his tents that he would set up by the borders or whatnot, because then that was another question that came along after.
Yeah, so the research, is that what jumped out at some of you other guys about this one more? The way she was prepared? What about the nature of her questions? Were there any others that, that you guys noticed or that you found interesting? Did you guys find this a particularly, did you find her a particularly skilled interviewer in this case, or did it just seem like a normal interview to you? Ethan, what did you think? Not really one thing or another. Did you think she was pretty straight up about, I mean, there could have been, he was a pretty aggressive guy, right? You think that it would have been any better, any worse to come at him with a different style, like to have been aggressive? You know, Tim Russert, if you watch that first clip we saw of Russert, he's like really aggressive, right? With that governor of Louisiana. Would that approach have worked as well with this guy? No, why not?
I would probably say no, only because if he was already aggressive from that point, he might have been more aggressive to the point where he might even just kind of cut the interview in itself.
Right.
I don't want to talk at all.
Yeah. So do you think that that was an advantage, and that, you know, even as kind of, I'm sure there are a lot of people in the audience who you know might have been really turned off by this guy, who, right, you know, who this guy would anger, but did she end up getting more out of it in a way by, I mean, do we learn anything from letting him go? Or do you think it would be good to see somebody who is like more of an advocate and more sympathetic for people getting locked up in hot tents to have been expressing that to his face? I mean, what would an audience benefit more from?
Personally, I feel like it was probably good just to let him talk, because it's like if you have someone just talking, you just kind of just feed him the mic, and he's gonna feed whatever information that he has or whatever he's feeling, without you know, pushing back. Because if you push back, then those things are not going to come out, possibly, because then he might get more aggressive, more angry, and might not say those things that are on his mind at the time.
Right. I mean, because she could just be on there doing a monologue on her own, right? I mean, what's the point of having him on if we don't actually hear like where he's coming from with all of this, as ugly as it may be, if we think it's ugly. Did you guys get any insights from listening to him talk into who he was or into the whole situation?
He seemed pretty like confrontational in a way, because one question that kind of stood out to me too is when she asked like who should pay, and he was kind of on the fence, like, well, I don't really care kind of thing. Like, as long as I'm putting away people and enforcing this law, he didn't really care who was paying for it.
Yeah. You think he came ready to knock heads with the press and to, you know, shut them down or whatever? Yeah, probably so. Okay. So let me try a couple of these other ones. I'm going to show a couple of clips from Bill Maher, because I like the way he does his thing. Let me see. Oops. Yeah, so this one.
Center for Humane Technology, who was featured in the new Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, Tristan Harris. Great to see you. Okay. So first of all, what a great documentary. Not all documentary. There's some reenactments in there, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But I wanted to ask you first about the election. You know, everyone who voted thinks they made a free and fair choice. Certainly free, my free will. But what you're getting at is that because of the manipulation that goes on from social media, where most people get their news now, it really wasn't a free choice in every sense of the word, was it?
No. Well, I mean, so the thing I think people need to get is that we are 10 years into this mind warp where we have been fed a individualized reality. Roger McNamee, who had on here a few years ago, talks about is the Truman Shows. We've got 3 billion Truman Shows. And everyone thinks that because, you know, imagine a husband and wife couple, they follow the same friends on Facebook. They've got the same friends, so if they open up Facebook, they should see the same feed. But that's not actually how it works. They'll actually see completely different realities based on what the algorithms will say. This is the thing that's likely to keep you here. And what that did is took the shared reality we have, put it through a paper shredder, and gave each of us a micro reality in which we're more and more certain that we're right and the other side is wrong. And it's totally confused us. I mean, we are so confused. We're 10 years into this process now.
Which nobody voted on.
No.
It just happened. And we, of course, are always seduced by convenience. No one wants to give up the phone. I mean, you know, I can't imagine doing that.
Correct.
But one thing I love that you portray, as I was alluding to a minute ago in the movie, is you personify what an algorithm is, really. I mean, an algorithm is just inside the computer. But you have 3 actors there. As
from Mad Men, in fact, the actor from Mad Men.
Right. And they're watching this guy on screens, and we see them making decisions about how they can manipulate him. Or we're going to send him an alert. Or we're going to say he got a like on that. Oh, we're going to tell him that there's a woman he's interested in within 100 feet.
Or his ex-girlfriend that he hasn't seen in a while. So maybe we'll use the ex-girlfriend. That'll get him back.
And this is what's, I mean, without people actually doing that, that is what's going on, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, even take, if you try to delete, it is evil. I mean, that's the whole point is because of this competition for attention, the companies started getting really aggressive about what could they dangle in front of your nervous system to get you to come back. If you ever try to delete your Facebook account, it'll actually show you 5 friends' faces and says, are you sure you want to delete your account? These 5 photos, these 5 friends, they're going to miss you. So it's like a digital drug lord. When you leave, they try to figure out something to dangle in front of you to convince you to come back. And it's really just, you know, it's destroyed our mental health of our teenagers. It's polarized our societies. It's addicted each of us. And it has really warped, I think, the psyche that now we are in the middle of with this election. Because I think much like a psychotic patient has a mind that is fractured against itself, our national psyche is now fractured against itself. If you look at even the examples of count the vote people and the stop the count, there's a great stat recently that Republicans estimate that 1/3 of Democrats are LGBTQ, even though only 6% are. And Democrats estimate that 38% of Republicans make more than $250,000 a year, even though it's.
Let me show you guys one other Bill Maher clip, just the beginning minutes of it.
The host of CNN's Fareed Zakaria, GPS, and author of the new book, 10 Lessons for a Post-Pandemic World. Fareed Zakaria is over here. I was so tempted by habit to lunge at you.
Well, this is from India. This is a perfectly nice substitute.
Okay, so I read your book in one big gobble. It's great read, quick read, and also like right out of the day's headlines. I mean, it's about the pandemic. Very gutsy to write a book before the thing is over, right?
And they call it a post-pandemic world.
Well, yeah, because we see in Europe, the pandemic's coming back in the fall. This thing is far from over. Do you worry about that? That that something's going to happen that be like, ooh, boy, I should have waited.
Well, I think no. I think I've got it about right in the sense of what I'm talking about is we now understand this, these problems in a way that we didn't, because this is not going to be the last pandemic. And one of the things I talk about in the book is this should be a wake-up call to realize we've been living in a way that is very risky. If you think about the way in which we are spewing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere
and eating,
the way we eat, I talk about the factory farms. Factory farms are essentially a petri dish for the next pandemic. You're just going to create larger and larger, more powerful viruses. The way we subsidize people to live at the edges of forests. So I feel as though we've got, and it's like we're driving the fastest race car in the world, and we're like, who needs seatbelts? Who needs insurance?
But that what you're really saying is we need to learn.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're the learn species, really. I mean, my question to you is, I hate to say this because it sounds so pessimistic, but I don't think one is going to do it. In other words, one pandemic. I don't think we're going to change after one. I think it's going to take more than one, because people are just going to go, oh, that was a fluke. Thank God 2020 is over. We're back to normal. I don't see less cheeseburgers being eaten.
Well, take a look at what happened.
Okay, so of those 2 Bill Maher clips, they're a little bit long, but of those 2 Bill Maher clips, what was your impression, y'all? Was he doing the kinds of interviews that we watched in the first two examples, or how is it different? Jonathan, how you doing?
Okay.
What did you think? Did that seem different than the first couple interviews to you in certain ways? The way that Bill Maher conducted the interview?
There's a lot more conversational, I think.
Yeah. Do you feel like you cover sports? Do you feel like you have the latitude to do that with an interviewee when you interview people?
I found that when I was doing like features on a player, it could be more conversational for the interview, but for the post games, it was more just like question and answer.
Yeah, and are you more interested? I mean, in this class, we're going to focus on print, but are you more interested in developing your skills as a broadcaster or as a print person?
I think at the moment I'm more interested in writing and print, but I feel like I've always wanted to move into multimedia a little bit more. I wanted to like learn about the other side too.
So let me just stop, before I go any further, let me just be frank, is watching these examples of these interviews today, has this been helpful to you guys to think about the different approaches and the different options? So why don't you guys tell me what you're picking up from this? Like, Ethan, you've been a little hard to read on it, but are you getting anything about this from watching these or no?
Yep.
Yeah. What do you think you're getting out of it from watching these different styles?
Seeing different styles of interviewing.
Yeah. Okay. So straight up, So how about any of the other guys? What did you notice any, because I've been kind of poking at or trying to point at specific aspects of them, but are you all seeing them the same way, or are you seeing something different that leaps out at you about these different approaches? What do you think of my categories there, which I kind of came up with on the fly, the basics, the pivot, the what was the other one? The trap, which is like the got you type of interview, and the casual.
Well, I say, if anything, these different types of interviews show us how you can get a different maybe answer or reaction out of who you're interviewing, depending on how they are as a person.
Yeah, and I think kind of what I was hoping we, by at least taking that approach, like there's a lot of different aspects of interviewing and interview technique that we can cover, and I think overall, between the readings I'm giving you, we cover a lot, right? I mean, one thing though that like we haven't even talked about yet that we can for a few minutes, maybe wrap it up, is like, well, two things. One is reaching out to people, and the other is the methods that you use for actually recording or capturing the interviews, right? But I mean, in terms of what we've already covered, I feel like the idea of maybe looking at this in terms of those four different styles just gives you the overall sense that like there's different advantages to different approaches that you can take, and that it's worth kind of thinking through what kind of an interview is this? And, am I doing it for an audio thing, or am I doing it for print? First of all, just the medium. But second of all, is this a kind of thing where the most important thing is for me to get the most important information while I'm there with the person, so that I'm not missing something because it's complicated or it's loaded? Like the thing about that fire is that's a huge, event. It's devastating. There's a lot to get your arms around in terms of the emotional impact and just the physical impact on the city. And so your main thing in a situation like that is just to slow things down and to give the person the room to offer the information, you know, to get the person to feel comfortable enough to deliver that, to be able to think while they're talking to you, so that they're saying things like, you know, these days we may think like there's no society left, that it's all dog eat dog, but an event like this really shows people coming out or coming together. Or for him to say something like, the dilemma I found myself in was whether or not to tell people they have to leave or letting them stay to fight the fire. If you're rushing people through something like that, then maybe you miss that, right? So, you know, recognizing when you need to kind of take that basics approach, right? The pivot thing, though, is also really important. And, you know, running up to the minutes before class, did any of you guys watch the Jonathan Swan interview with Donald Trump? This was the guy from Axios, and I'll just show you guys maybe a moment of it, just so you have an idea of at least what I'm talking about. Here, wait. Well, let's see what this, oh yeah.
John Lewis is lying in state in the US Capitol. How do you think history will remember John Lewis?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know John Lewis. He chose not to come to my inauguration. He chose, I never met John Lewis, actually. I don't believe.
Do you find him impressive?
I can't say one way or the other. I find a lot of people impressive. I find many people not impressive, but no, but I didn't.
Do you find his story impressive?
He didn't come to my inauguration. He didn't come to my State of the Union speeches, and that's okay. That's his right. And again, nobody has done more for Black Americans than I have.
I understand.
He should have come. I think he made a big mistake.
But taking your relationship with him out of it, do you find his story impressive, what he's done for this country?
He was a person that devoted a lot of energy and a lot of heart to civil rights, but there were many others also.
There's a petition to rename the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama as the John Lewis Bridge. Would you support that idea?
I would have no objection to it if they'd like to do it.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Would have no objection to it whatsoever.
So you get at least a sense of the interview from that. I think it's worth watching because you know, to the point of what we were talking about in here, there's a combination of maybe all of the things that we've been talking about today in that interview. Now that I'm thinking about it, you know, a lot of people were lavishing Jonathan Swan with praise for that interview, and I was kind of like, maybe because there was so much on cable news about what a masterful interview it was, that I was kind of like not seeing it. But I guess now that we're talking about it in the way we have this morning, I would have to say to Swan's credit that you do see kind of the best of all the stuff we've been talking about. He's really well prepared. You know, he is conscious of pacing in terms of letting Trump talk and not charging in and confronting Trump in a way that either shuts down the interview or just shuts down Trump, right? Which is, you know, a thing to deal with Trump in and of itself, in the sense that you may not shut him down, but just trying to get a word in edgewise is a challenge in itself, right? So Trump kind of forces his interviewees a lot of times to push back more aggressively than Gwen Ifill did with Arpaio. But so you've got the well-prepared interview. You got the fact that Swan is thinking, you know, in terms of the basics, is thinking of what are the fundamental, most important questions to ask, and being conscious of, like, you know, giving the interview the breathing space to do it. You also have the pivot in the sense of, like, and I, you know, what I was really looking for and I couldn't find is that he does do a really good job, because, you know, Trump will throw out a lot of different facts that are wrong or that are really questionable, but he'll do it very rapidly, and he'll overwhelm interviewers who want to go, wait a minute, the third thing you said was totally wrong, or the third, fourth, and fifth thing you said were totally wrong, but there were so many different things to challenge there that he overwhelms it. And if you watch that interview in its entirety, it is really impressive the degree to which, I mean, Swan can't catch all of it, and when he's taking the incoming, but he does do a really good job of like being fluid enough to pivot where he needs to and be like, wait, what did you say right there? You know, like at one point, Trump is saying, all the materials show that we, you know, that we've got the virus spread under control, or all the, you know, and Swan is like, wait, what materials, what, you know, and Trump says something absurd like the books about it. It's like, there are no books about the pandemic 2 months into it going in. So he does a really good job of pivoting. And then, you know, finally there is to some degree that final thing of the trap, right? He lets kind of Trump walk into these things where Trump does maybe more damage to himself by just letting him go, or, by Swan setting it up in a certain way where it's like Trump has to deal with the realities of what he's asking about in a way that exposes what's really wrong here. So it's it's probably worth watching just as a mix of all those things. But anyway, I guess, Krista, I guess, wasn't able to make it this morning, but she had an example of a white supremacist one, which, maybe we can catch up with when she was there, because I'm not sure. It's like I think an 8-minute, so it's a long segment, and I'm not sure what part of it she found particularly interesting. But in any case, I guess the last 2 points I'd make for today or for this week are, let's just kind of do a quick round, and I want to hear from you guys how you get down an interview. Do you use a recording? Do you use pen and paper? And how do you understand the advantages and disadvantages? So Claire, you want to start?
Just like how I'd prefer to take down an interview.
Yeah.
I guess I'd say I just would rather record it so I can like re-listen to it and like rehear everything the person says.
Right. Nate, how about you?
What was the question again?
How do you take down an interview, and what do you see as the pros and cons, like recording it, writing it down?
I usually record it because if I'm trying to take notes, then I don't want to like misquote or have all my attention trying to write it and miss something. So I'd rather record and then listen back to it.
Right. Aaron?
Same. I'd rather record, but if I could too, I'd want a video because then you can see like their facial expression as well and take that into consideration.
Okay. Ethan?
Yeah, I do the same with recording. With video, I'd like to use that as well, but I also take notes at like specific times during the interview, like
Right
notable
down the time
moments.
signature.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you find that works? Do you have a hard time multitasking, like focusing on the interview and writing down the time signatures?
No, just because it's like really quick. It's usually just a moment. It doesn't take too long.
Mm-hmm. Charleston?
Personally, I'd probably go with video more so because just from my last class yesterday, I was saying that 1 second of video is like worth 1.8 million words, something like that. Plus, it's like one thing, I don't know if you guys heard of the Peter Boy, Camel Boy, or whatever, the one in Hilo. He died like well back in like the 90s or whatnot. That interview with his family, and his dad looked particularly weird in that interview. And I didn't understand how from that one video they didn't, kind of look into him, because they ended up finding out not too long ago that it was them that ended up killing their own kid. So I think
What was that? What was
the
it?
Peter Camel Boy, I forget his name, but it was a story from way back in like the 90s in Hilo, and They had an interview with the family, like when the boy went missing, and the dad just looked very weird in that video. And for me, I was like, nah, that speaks volumes. Like he's got to be something really weird with him. But then they didn't find out till like 20 years later that yeah, it was him that ended up killing his own son.
Right.
So
So Jonathan, well, that's interesting. So Jonathan, what about you? What's your preferred mode? You're gonna go with
I
the
like
gang
to
here?
yeah, I just like to record and then like transcribe before I write. Because I feel like if I was taking notes during the interview, I wouldn't be able to like engage the subject as much. I want to be able to like talk to them without like looking down writing. Yeah, and then when I was doing baseball for Star Ad, like I would do one video interview per game. So we'd have like the subject of the recap, because for them I was writing more like almost like feature type recap, so less of like the actual game and what like one player did. So for the one player we would do video and then post on social media, but for just writing purposes I like to record and like transcribe.
What was the quickest turnaround time you had at the Star Ad?
I'm not sure, just like pretty typical sports stuff. Because I was basically writing like the companion piece to Steven Tsai's like main recap on like the Warrior World blog. So
do you have a day? Did you have an hour?
No. It's like at most like 40, 50 minutes after the game.
40, 50 minutes after the game, and you're
at
videoing?
most, yeah. For the video, it's like no editing, so it's like asking a few questions to one player and then just posting it straight up on Twitter. Yeah.
So, so you guys, how do you feel about just like only using pen and paper for the rest of the semester? No recording. Is that cool? Why would I do that? Why would I possibly do that? Why do people have notepads and pens? If every single one of you guys is like, yeah, recording's better.
Oh, personally, I write my notes. Like I don't type my notes out. I write my notes because I find it way easier to remember when you write it out and you go over it. You just kind of when you're writing it, just kind of gets ingrained into your mind. But that's how I do my notes.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely an asset, but I mean, that in itself probably wouldn't outweigh everything. All of you guys have said, I would rather record, right? Yeah, Ethan?
It forces you to like select which information you choose, like be more selective with what, instead of like, you record the whole thing, you can kind of just you might skim over some details, but with this, it kind of forces you to be more attentive.
Yeah, I think it would, but you guys are missing the main reason, which is that if you work for a daily, if you want to work for the Star Ad or Civil Beat, you a lot of times wouldn't be able to get away with recording it because it would take too long. If you have a daily turnaround and you want to do 3 to 4 interviews for that story, Jonathan, you've now done turnaround, right? If you had to do 3 to 4 interviews for a story, to make it
no, that takes a while.
And you had a day to do it, you wouldn't be able to do it, right? You simply would not be able to do recordings, transcribing, going over it. You might be able to transcribe bits and pieces, but you literally would not be able to record your interviews and get the thing done on time. And these daily reporters, like, we can bring them in as guests and have them talk to you. They'll tell you, yeah, I'm supposed to write a story like every day. I mean, I can tell you that when I was on the job, I was expected more days than not to write a story that day. And so, although I came in there like you guys saying, you know what, I would prefer to do the recordings, that was more often than not an option. And the other thing is that if right now we're in a pandemic, so you'd maybe be working the phone all day at that kind of a job, right? But most of the time, I mean, in fact, with the professionals, even right now, they're running around town. And you guys have done, I think everybody in here has done multimedia, right? Claire, have you done some multimedia? like with audio storytelling?
Like taking interviews like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because every one of you guys should know then that the quality of the sound is, you know, if you're going to use it for anything else, is important. And then a lot can go wrong, right? If you're running around from interview to interview, you're doing 3 or 4 in a day, all in different parts of town, and you got your phone, and each one of those is an essential interview. If you add that up day after day, there's a reasonable chance that some of the time your equipment's going to fail, or the sound's going to be too loud, or you're basically going to walk away and you won't have your interview. Like, you won't be able to hear it. Like, I can tell you as someone, I mean, our equipment was different back then. It was literally a tape recorder, you know, not a phone, but stuff goes wrong, right, with recordings. So the fact that you have to do pen and paper interviews to do any kind of quick deadline type of journalism, that's, I think, one of the reasons why all of us are hesitant to do it. I mean, maybe we should just do a quick go round about this. Like, what's, you know, Claire, what's your main hesitation about pad and pen? Just rely entirely on that.
Well, I mean, I feel like it would make me get more things wrong. Like, if I wrote something down and I looked at it later, I'd probably like think that I meant something else that I didn't mean, and then get something wrong.
or that you didn't get down exactly what the person said, right? What else? You guys have already mentioned one downside to doing it by writing it down. What are the other challenges of it?
Having to like constantly stop asking them to like repeat points, and then it's a different quote coming back the second time.
That's right. So what I'm getting at here is that note taking with this is a skill, and it takes practice, and you're not good at it right away, and you have to do it a lot to get good at it. And the main things I can just tell you as someone who went from being very unsure about it to, you know, being very confident about it is a couple things. One is that, you know, Truman Capote used to say that he was this brilliant mind, and that he had trained himself to be able to listen to minutes or hours of interview and capture in his brain exactly what the person said, like with a photographic memory, and put it down. And I think the truth is that what Truman Capote had was a really good ear for the way people talk, and he made up a lot of the stuff that he wrote, because you cannot, I mean, I don't care who you are, you cannot train yourself to listen to people go on a monologue and remember exactly everything they say verbatim. You know, in fact, I think 9 times out of 10, you can only listen to very short things and get them right, and you often get them wrong, right? So, I mean, a couple things about that. One is that what I learned to try and practice and to get good at is to figuring out how much of what somebody said I could remember pretty accurately before they stopped talking, which was usually about a sentence or two. Okay. And that's, you know, that's just me. And maybe some of you guys are better at that. But I could usually get a sentence or two down you know, pretty close to exactly the way they said it. Beyond that, it was a totally different story, right? Secondly, you know, you can have your recording as a backup to double check with the quotes that you want to take down, but getting them down, you're at least, you know, a long way towards what you need to get that story written by deadline, right? If you got to go double check it, okay. Third, what you get good at if you do a lot of interviewing where you've got a notepad is you get good at being able to establish a rhythm with people, where you figure out that you can take notes, you can type, or you can write while you're talking to them. They need to be aware of the fact that you're trying to keep up with them by taking notes. And this is where eye contact is really important. If you signal these people, okay, like, I'm ready to hear the next thing you say, they will work with you. And the other thing is, you need to develop a really good shorthand. So like what I would do is I would skip all the vowels. So journalism would be JNLSM, okay? And some words, a lot of words, I would come up with like a abbreviation for it that I knew, like because would just be BC, you know, and I had a bunch of things like that. And so you want to develop a system that enables you to write quick, and then you want to practice developing a rhythm with the people you interview so that you are able to remember the sentence or two they said and signal to them like, hold on a sec, let me get this down. I want to get what you're saying down right. Okay, let's get to the next thing. And that may sound like it would be really awkward or whatever, but if you're confident about it and you've practiced at this and you do it, it works. And yeah, it's you don't want to be, if you guys really want to do stuff at a paper where they're hiring for you for a job, you don't want to be stuck trying to rely on recording every interview you do. So this semester, I'm not going to require you to write notes, but let's try and focus on that and work on it so that you guys can start getting practice at it and getting better. So who do we not hear from about this? Nate, what do you think about handwritten notes? Have you practiced it at all? What do you think about what I'm suggesting here?
I have like 5 legal pads. I like to write my notes down for like everything. Yeah, I mean, I agree that it helps you remember things, and I agree that it's way faster, but I also know that I don't like to, or I know it's like bad to get quotes wrong, and I know like my memory is not the best. So that's why like I try to record and then listen back. But in terms of just like things that aren't quoting, I like to take handwritten notes.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you've already realized this is important and been practicing at it, right?
Yeah, I think the timestamp thing is something I want to do more of. I think that's good. Like a good makes the when you go back and look for quotes a lot easier.
Yeah. Although that can be challenging because now you're talking about, if you are taking handwritten notes, now you're talking about recording, coming up with the interview questions, being ready to pivot when they say things, sometimes maybe boxing them in when that's relevant to do with a written piece. I mean, we're not doing broadcast, right? And keeping up with them while taking notes, while watching your recording device and writing down the timestamp. That's a lot to do all at once, right? I mean, one thing that I did a lot, and this may sound strange if you guys haven't done a lot of note taking before, but you'd be surprised at how much you might end up doing this, because I did it a lot, is that you ask them questions to keep them talking so that you can catch up with what you were writing down in your notes. Because if you literally have them sit there and wait for you, they'll get bored. So you ask them something and you're listening, but you're more like catching up with what they said before. But I think, regarding the concern Nate raises about, well, then you end up with inaccurate quotes. What you do is first of all, I would try to keep the quotes really short, like a couple of sentences long, which you want pretty short quotes anyway. You don't necessarily want long paragraphs, but also I would read back to them as I'm going. Like, is this kind of what you said? So that even if I couldn't get it exactly the way they'd said it originally, I at least knew that I wasn't putting words in their mouth or that I wasn't misquoting them. Because they understand that you're writing it down, and that you're not a tape recorder. So yeah, that's kind of that's that. And then I'm trying to remember what the final point was that we were going to mention. It was how we record things, and I don't remember, but I think that pretty much covers. Do any of you guys have any questions about interviewing at this point? Oh, reaching out to people was the other thing. So what have you guys found works best for reaching out to people? What do you find works worst?
Emails.
Yeah. Did that just totally not work for you, Ethan?
Emails weren't highly effective. Phone calls work a lot better, and or confronting them in person.
Yeah. Probably the latter is most of all, right? Yeah. Um, and and then the interview, the email thing, then they get into like what we were dealing with the Honolulu Zoo Society, right? Of like, can you give me this script and I will give you my script and we'll call that an interview, right? Which you don't want to do. So I heard from one of the seniors who said that they would when they would get voicemail, they would leave voicemail and then they would call the next day and leave another voicemail, and they would just make sure to sound very professional and all business and straight to the point in both emails, and they found that was effective. I guess we'll see. What about texting? What do you guys think of that? Does anyone, I mean, how many of you guys listen to your voicemail versus like if somebody calls you, would you prefer they leave a text message instead? I feel like a lot of us are, I mean, am I wrong about this, or do a lot of us like we're used to texting now, not so much voicemail?
I mean, I don't speak for everybody, but I listen to my voicemails.
Do you leave them
I leave voicemails, yeah.
to other friends or whatever?
Yeah. That's just like how like we grew up doing it. Like we never would just leave a text unless it's like hours later and they haven't gone back to me, then I'll leave a text.
That surprises me because I would have thought with your generation, you guys just don't do that anymore. Like, don't leave voicemails anymore. But you grew up.
I think I just got it from my parents because my parents preferred voicemails, and so I just got in the habit of doing that.
Yeah. Okay. How about the rest of you all? Do you you used to? Does one seem more normal to you than the other, voicemail or text? Do you think texting seems less professional? You do? That's interesting. Well, I mean, I guess if if you guys are confident about that, I mean, one of the things is, I do history research more now. I'm not in the field as much. So if you're getting the vibe out there that voicemail is a more professional approach than texting, then go with that. I would have thought that texting might be more effective nowadays. Um, but I think that you guys are out there making calls every day, and so that's something you guys would kind of know better than me about. So, all right. Any final thoughts about I'm trying to think of a good final question for you guys to leave it off with about interviewing. Let's do a lightning round here. Most challenging thing that you'd like to work on about interviewing. So Claire?
I guess going back to like note taking, I've never really ever like tried note taking while doing an interview, so I guess that'll probably be kind of challenging for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, work on your shorthand, right? Like maybe that approach I used of leaving out the vowels and coming out with some abbreviated words, and work on your rhythm with it. Like maybe practice with a friend or something if you need to, you know. Ethan, how about you?
Sorry, I missed the question.
Biggest challenge or thing would most like to work on with your interviewing?
Oh yeah, definitely note taking.
I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I barely do any note taking besides the timestamps. So
you struggled a lot though with last semester when you're trying to do the skater thing or whatever with locking down those interviews. So just
it was getting people to talk, and that was kind of a touchy subject because people didn't want to talk about the spots. I think it was just my topic that held me back.
Really? Okay. Because there is that other issue there of, which we were kind of touching on, and maybe it's not as effective by watching these interviews on TV, but how do you get people to talk, right? Like, how do you get them open up. You know, we did talk a lot about that last semester, but we can revisit it, right? Erin, how about you?
I would say reaching out to people or deciding like what approach to use with different interviewees.
Yeah. So maybe when we have, I'm trying to think of how I could open this up, but you know what would be good is like when we assign things, we talk about that a little bit. Because I'll assign it, like I put up, you know, next week's homework yesterday. And by the way, you know, I'm going to try to give you guys till end of the day Fridays, with the exception that when there's stuff we kind of would be really helpful to do before a class, like on that Thursday before the Friday, that I'll give you a earlier deadline on those occasions. But for the most part with stories, I'll try and make it that your stories are due that Friday. But in any case, maybe once I put out the assignment, we can have conversations as you're working on your reporting about what's the best approach here for an interview, right? Because that's really when it matters. It's like when you're thinking about these ones. Or Erin, if you, and the rest of you guys too, if you ever want to interview, email me about like what's the best way to prepare for this, you know, then we can talk about it. Charleston, how about you? Biggest challenge, thing you most want to work on for interviewing?
Probably the interview itself. Like I remember last year or the last time I took one of your classes, like I found out like, wow, I'm very terrible in my interviewing. That's something I need to work on. Because I felt like I was kind of fumbling my words or whatnot, or I had questions that were written and then maybe they might have answered it and you still ask the same questions or whatnot. So
don't do that.
Yeah, that's why the interview in itself needs some work on for sure.
How many of you think it's terrible if you're bumbling in your words while you're doing an interview? I don't think it. That's why I like being a print guy, because I can fumble and bumble. You know, these people have to be crisp and clean, and that's great. But fuck that. I feel like I got as good or better, you know, material because I would be fumbling and bumbling and talking to them, and you know, there would be crosstalk and all kinds of things go on when it's not a broadcast interview. I don't want, you know, I never felt envious of the people doing broadcast interviews. To the contrary, I felt like they should be envious of the kind of thing I get to do, because I get to just talk to people and get real. You know, they have to put on a show every time they do an interview, which is, you know, one thing I had misgivings about showing you guys these different kinds of things. Because if you do print, it's a totally different story. Like just do what, you know, how do you guys feel about asking stupid questions? Is it okay to ask a stupid question? What do you think? Erin, you're smiling.
I think it depends on the situation.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because some of the textbooks that I could have given you are like, don't ask stupid questions. Whatever you do, don't ask a stupid question. And then like Chip Scanlon says literally in his textbook, go ahead and ask lots of stupid questions. You know, well, it depends on what you mean by a stupid question, right? So what do I mean by that? Why should I encourage you to ask stupid questions?
Because then you might get the best responses or the best quotes to use.
Yeah.
And it also makes like the interviewee more comfortable.
Yeah, like sometimes you know, you almost like with that idea of the basics interview, you almost want to think through what is the stupid question that I could ask, right? That, oh my God, you guys are too polite. It's 5 minutes past. I'm sorry. But anyway, we can pick up on stupid questions next time we talk. Just remind me, because I'll forget to talk about stupid questions. But the idea is just that you sometimes, you know, you don't know if you don't ask. And a lot of times you're there to be Joe Blow, like Joe Sixpack, Joe Everybody, who's like, well, what does this do? How does that work? You know, what happened then? You know, and those may seem like stupid questions, but if you're going to represent the public, then you got to ask the dumb questions that everybody who doesn't know anything, who's not an expert about it, wants to know, like, well, is this the right side up or is not the right side up? You know, if it's some piece of equipment you've never seen. So go ahead and ask stupid questions. By all means, enjoy the stupid questions. Okay, you guys, sorry I went over. I didn't realize I was going over, but I will see you all Tuesday, and please email me. But this assignment is an interview, so why not, can you guys all try with the pen, and we'll talk about what was most difficult or how you can improve. Okay, I'm out. Bye.